Hi. In this video, we're going to be exploring the dangers of malware. Specifically, we're going to target a rootkit. We're going to install a rootkit, kind of talk about how it works and the dangers of rootkits. So what I'm going to do is powered on my server 2003. So you're going to want to make sure that you power on your server 2003. And what I want to do is I'm going to start by attaching an ISO. Alright, so I want to connect up to a CD. So I'm going to click on my CD and I'm going to connect up to an ISO image on a data store. So previously we've been working in the tools area. I'm just going to go up one directory in the ethical hacking folder. There's a rootkit folder, and inside the rootkit folder I've got a CD that's called HXDEF100R. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attach that DVD, and I can see that there's some files here. So one thing that's really important to understand when you're dealing with software, specifically malware, is that it's often included with source code. The reason that this happens is that antivirus looks for known signatures. Now, for example, if I were to write some malware, maybe a backdoor, maybe a virus, maybe a rootkit, what's going to happen is somebody's going to notice that. So if I write that and it starts to spread around, there's these mavens that really watch their computer, watch their processes, and as soon as something starts acting differently than it's supposed to, and there's people that truly monitor all their threads, and as soon as a new thread spins up that they don't know why it's there, they dig into it, and then eventually they report it. And when they report it, they'll report it to like a Symantec or some security firm. And what they'll do is they'll dig into it and confirm that yes, this is malware, this is a virus. And then what they do is they take a section of it and create a fingerprint of it. So when they create that fingerprint of that specific signature of that malware, they put it inside a database. So now at home you're running your antivirus and life is good. Your antivirus will daily update and grab new files, definitions, virus definitions, and update your antivirus. So when your antivirus gets updated, if you were to happen to download something that had malware in it, your antivirus would match that signature and say, yep, this is definitely malware. So that's how antivirus works. Now, if I were to sit down and write some malware and start to spread it, it would get past antivirus. It would get past antivirus until somebody identifies it and reports it. So I know some people will use like torrents and they'll get keygens or cracks or something to try to get free software. Typically, those keygens or those cracks are built with malware inside of them. And if you're one of the first person to grab it and install it, you very well could have infected your machine, and your antivirus wouldn't even realize that it was malware until eventually somebody finds it, reports it, and then your antivirus would catch it. But by that time, your computer has already been compromised. So it's just one of those things to kind of keep note of and understand how it works a little bit. So what's often done is source code is included with viruses. And the reason for that is because if somebody just tweaks it a little bit and recompiles it, it's got a brand new signature. So this is why this whole virus writing is such a huge problem, is because source code's out there and all someone has to do is just tweak it a little bit, recompile it, and then they've got a whole new variation of the old virus. So anyways, for this lab, what we're going to do is we're going to install, it's called Hacker Defender. HXDEF100R specifically is the one that we're going to be doing. And really the only two files you need are the exe file and the INI file. Now you got to be very, very careful. This is viral. It is something that will infect your machine. And if you accidentally double click on the exe, pretty much you're going to have to fight to get the computer back to how it was. You may even have to restore it back to a previous restore point from backup. So, and I did misspeak a second ago. I said this is viral. It is malware. Technically, it isn't a virus. It isn't viral. It won't propagate, meaning that it won't start to spread to other computers. It's self-contained. So what this is it's a rootkit. So I'll talk about a little bit more about what a rootkit is in a couple of minutes. For right now, what I'd like you to do is just go to the My Computer and then go to your C drive. Right now I have no files inside my C drive. So I'm just going to make this window a little bit smaller and drag it down here. And I'm just going to drag both of these files, the INI file and the exe file, down to the root of my C drive. So there is also the source code, which we're not going to compile it and we're not going to mess around with it. If you want to look at it, you're free to look at it. I do have a file here called hxdef100-prod.txt. So this file is actually very similar to this file. They're both INI files. Well, this is actually a text file, and INI is just a text file. It's a configuration file. So if I were to look at the hxdef100.ini, I'm going to double click on the INI, not the exe. So I'm just going to do that. So this is the config file. So what we can do is we can configure certain processes to be hidden, certain programs to be hidden, certain ports not to show, certain services to disappear, certain registry keys can disappear. So there's different things that we can hide from the operating system. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to hide some stuff from the operating system. So specifically, we're going to hide Notepad, and we're going to hide a couple of ports, so that way if we surf the web surfing that we're doing isn't showing up. So the way that a rootkit works is it's similar to how a crack works with software. So like, for example, certain people will create cracks, and what they do is they circumvent the registration process for a piece of software. So if you download like Photoshop and you try to install Photoshop, it's going to ask you to use a registration key that you have to purchase, and the purchase prices will vary for different pieces of software. So maybe it's a couple $100, and you surf the web and you find out that somebody wrote a program that will allow you to get it for free. Now, previously I talked about cracks and keygens being a place where people distribute malware. All right, so keep that in mind. That is it. Nothing is for free. All right, but we'll just talk about how it works. So basically, when I double click on Photoshop, it runs through a process where it starts to load everything into memory, and it hits a certain point where it checks to say, is this a registered piece of software? Yes or no. And if it's no, then it pops up a dialog box saying this product currently isn't registered. Type in your registration key. So what some people will do is they'll download the crack, they'll double click on the crack, they'll run it, and what it'll do is, first of all, it'll probably install malware on your system, but we covered that. But then the second thing it'll do is it actually will create what's called a jump point inside the program. So it actually modifies the binary of the program you're trying to run. So for example, Photoshop, after running the crack, it modifies it so as it's sequentially going through the lines to execute, it hits a certain line right before it's going to ask the question, is this registered, yes or no. That line before that, it actually jumps over the line where it's asking the question, and then it continues loading as if it was fully paid for. So people will write programs to create jump points within applications to basically get around having to pay for that software. So that's a crack. So what a rootkit is a rootkit is nothing more than a crack. So it's a very, very elaborate crack. So if we talk a little bit about how Microsoft Windows works, We've got all these nice folders, and if I double click on the folder, I see more folders and files and stuff like that. So if I were to go inside a specific folder, this is what I'm seeing in the graphical user interface. But underneath this is a process that's running, and it's enumerating through all of the files that are there. So what the rootkit's basically doing is creating a wedge inside the kernel. So as the kernel is saying this file, next, this file, next, this file, and displaying it, the kernel now is going this file, and then it goes to a certain spot in memory saying, well, does this file start with, in this case, hxdef? Is this file rcmd? So it's now going through a bunch of if statements in memory, and if none of those are true, it'll display it, and then it'll go to the next file, throw that into a specific point in memory, and that point in memory is our rootkit currently running. And that spot in memory then will say, well, does it start with hxdef? Does it start with rcmd? And then it just enumerates through and displays everything that doesn't start with hxdef or rcmd or whatever we type in here. So if we type new things in here, that will now be part of that wedge that's been created in there. So the danger with this is, well, first of all, you won't see it. So if something's running on your computer, you won't see it because your operating system won't show it to you. The other thing is that the antivirus that's running will skip over it. So the antivirus companies and Microsoft have been in war for quite some time about wanting low-level hooks because they can't trust what the operating system is reporting to them. And the reason that they're saying they need these low-level hooks is just because if the kernel's compromised from a rootkit, their antivirus is going to be completely circumvented. So that's really what a rootkit is. So I'm just going to go full screen here because I can see I'm working from home and it disconnects and reconnects often. So if you have that problem, if you do a Control-Alt-Enter, that'll go full screen. We'll still hear it disconnect and reconnect in the background, but it's a little less annoying. Okay, so what I really wanted to do here is I wanted to show you this hxdef ini, which we're going to be using. But there's also this prod. Now, we won't be using it, but I included it just so that way you could see what it looks like. This file is exactly the same execute file as this file over here. The main thing is it's been what's called obfuscated. Certain characters can be thrown in here, and basically this file would be sitting on the C drive, and just by throwing a couple backslashes in here, now it's got a different signature. If I throw a colon in here, it's got a different signature than what maybe my antivirus would be expecting. So the author of the virus decided to include certain files which are just noise. So as soon as this file gets pulled in to the hxdef.exe, it runs through a cleansing process where it takes out all of these additional less thans, greater thans, backslashes, colons, and eventually it'll look just like this. So this file here is a cleaned up version of this file. And the main reason is just, again, to get around antivirus. So if the antivirus knows that the config file starts with this, that can really create a signature for that, and as soon as the config file hits the machine, the user will be notified, hey, you've got a virus. So what the author did is just decided to allow people to throw, backslash, forward slash, colons, and now it's a completely different file, and it's hard to create a signature if it's always changing. So we're not going to really use the hxdef prod. If you wanted to, you could. You'd just have to rename it to the hxdef100.ini, and it would automatically clean it up for you. But I'm just using the cleaned up version just so that way it's easier to read and we can all be on the same page. So right now I just closed all my windows and I'm going to my computer. I'm going to go to my C drive. I currently see both files, which means I haven't infected myself yet, which is a really good thing. So what I want to do is I actually want to add notepad.exe into my hidden processes. So I'm going to go into this hxdef100.ini, and there's root processes and there's hidden processes. So I want to use the hidden processes. So I've got the hxdef, the rcmd. Right below that, under hidden processes, I'm going to just type in notepad.exe. And now if I'm running Notepad, it will be hidden from the process. Now, in the real world, you really wouldn't be using Notepad. You would be using some Trojan horse. And a Trojan horse is a program that'll open up a port so that way a remote hacker can make a connection to your machine. And if they make a connection to your machine, they can do things like log keystrokes. They can look at your screen, maybe turn on your webcam. So that's what a Trojan horse will do. But just for purposes of demonstration, Notepad will work perfect underneath the hidden processes because it's an exe just like a Trojan horse would be an exe. So the other thing I want to do is I want to just scroll down and I see hidden ports. So the hidden ports has TCP/I, which is TCP input, TCP/O, which is TCP output, in UDP. So if I wanted to maybe hide UDP traffic, I could do whatever port I want to hide. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to use TCP/O, so that way if I go and surf the web, you won't see me surfing the web. If it was going to really be a Trojan horse, somebody would be connecting to my computer and they'd make up some port number like 1258. I mean, they just make up some number that's a non-commonly used port number, and then they would use that, and then they can hide that. So that way, if you were monitoring your traffic, you wouldn't see them connecting up to you. So the operating system would report back to whatever packet sniffing program like Wireshark. You just wouldn't even see it there. So under TCP/O, I'm going to just type in port 80, and I'm going to do a comma, and I'm going to do 443. So that way, if I'm surfing encrypted web or unencrypted HTTP or HTTPS, either website that I go to, this will not be reported. So at this point, I'm just going to save this file. So I did the TCP/O for 80 and 443, and if I scroll up to the top here, I've got hidden processes, and I just threw Notepad in there. So I'm just going to close this, and I'm going to say save, yes. Now you do not want to double click on that, so don't do that. We will execute it through the command line. For now, I'm just going to close this down, and I'm just going to open up Notepad. So I have Notepad here. Otherwise, I could just go all programs, accessory, Notepad. And I'm just going to type in Joe is here. You can use your own name. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to right click on my taskbar. So down in this gray area is my taskbar, and there's a task manager here. I'm just going to run this task manager. Now applications, as a programmer, I can decide if I want my application to show up in applications. Alright, so Notepad shows up underneath applications, but if I were going to be writing like a Trojan horse, I wouldn't want it showing up here, so you wouldn't see it. So like for example, we've got a whole bunch of services that are currently running. Those services are not showing up underneath applications. But if I go to processes, everything shows up in processes. So I would see, anything that may be a process currently running, like my iNet info. I see all of those services as well. If I go and I click on Notepad, that's this. So I see Notepad's running. So as a programmer, I really don't have the option to remove any processes. So that's where people use rootkits to get around that. So this is being shown here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a screenshot of this. So I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to wiggle this around here, and I'm going to open up Word. And I am going to do a screenshot. So I'm going to show that I see Notepad here. So I'm just going to do my Alt print screen. I'm going to paste that right here. Okay, so I've got my print screen that shows Notepad, so I'm just going to minimize this for now. Okay, so I've got Notepad. All right, that's good. And then what I want to do next is I'm going to just close down this task manager. I'm going to close this down. I'm not going to save it. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to open up the command line and I'm going to type in netstat and I'm going to hit enter. And I don't see anything right now. So netstat looks for any traffic that's going from my computer to anyone else's computer. So I'm just going to open up Internet Explorer here and I'm just going to work my way over to google.com and I'll just add Google. I'm just going to say OK. And then I'm going to go back over to my command line and I'm going to hit my up arrow and rerun netstat again. So this time when I run netstat, I see that I've got a bunch of connections being made. So I've got different ports. I can see that communication is leaving my computer and going to Google and then coming back. So that's how netstat works. So this is going to be another screenshot that I'm going to take. So I'm just going to show a screenshot. And then I'm going to go back into my virtual machine here. Alright, so I'm just going to minimize the browser because we'll be back there again in a minute. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use DOS and I'm going to do a CD space backslash. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to be at my C:\\. If I type in dir and hit enter, I get a directory listing. So I see hxdef100. So that's another thing that once this is running, we won't see that either. So I'm just going to grab a screenshot of this. So quite a few screenshots in this lab. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to want to do the installation of the rootkit. So it's really important how this gets typed in. So what we're going to type in is we're going to type in hxdef. If I hit tab, it'll automatically fill in hxdef100.exe. So they created a special flag. If I do a space, if I do a dash, colon, no service, one word. So it's space, dash, colon, no service. What that does is it allows the hxdef to run, but not install itself as a service. So it'll run like as if it were installed, but as soon as I reboot my machine, it'll go back to how it was before it was installed. So that's why it's really important. Don't click on it because it'll actually install it as a service. It'll hide itself, and then we got to go through the process of trying to remove it. There are tools that can help you find rootkits and remove rootkits, but it's kind of difficult. There's a Rootkit Revealer, Rootkit Hunter, and what these programs do is they know that certain rootkits utilize certain spots in memory. So what they'll do is they'll check out those spots in memory and see if they can find the rootkit in memory instead of trying to find it on the disk. So I'm just going to hit enter now. And it looks like it ran. So I'm just going to do a dir and I do a directory listing and I do not see that it is installed. So right now it's actually hidden. So I'm just going to do a screenshot of this showing that now it's gone. So I'm just going to do a screen. I'm I go back over into my Word. So then I'm going to do netstat. I'm going to hit enter. So I don't see anything, but connections go away. All right. So like I went to Google and I searched something. Very commonly, those connections will disappear just because the web is a disconnected state. Basically, when I typed in google.com, hit go, it makes a connection out to the web server and it downloads the HTML files and then it disconnects. Now, Netstat keeps it up for a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here and I'm just going to search for cars. I'm going to hit enter. So now it just did a Google search. So if I do my netstat, I'm going to hit my up arrow, hit enter. I don't see anything. Okay, so my netstat completely is hiding the fact that any web traffic's going on. Now, a hacker obviously wouldn't be doing web traffic. They would be doing their specific port for their rootkit. But for right now, I'm just going to grab a screenshot showing that I've got no netstat traffic, but yet I do see the fact I'm surfing the web. So I'm just going to do a screen print. And then the last thing is just, I'm going to close this down. I'm going to close this down. Is I'm just going to open up that notepad. And it doesn't matter what you type. Okay. I'm still here. I'm going to go to my task manager and I am going to look underneath the processes. If I order them by alphabetical and do an N for Notepad, Notepad is not currently in there. So I'm just going to grab a screenshot of this as well. So I'm just going to move that. It's going to show Notepad's open. So at this point, I mean, everything that we've done, we've just done it in reverse order, and we can see that the rootkit truly has hidden anything. So, and just to kind of show how messed up this kind of is like right now the operating system is displaying the desktop. If I right-click on this desktop and say create a new folder, okay, so I've got new folder. If I type in hxdef and hit enter, it's like I don't know what you're talking about, so it went to new folder. So it's like if I didn't even type that on at all, now it's saying it couldn't even find it. So the folder was there, now it's not there. I see it there, which is actually a ghost image of it, because now the operating system, I'm double clicking on it. So if I hit like F5 right now to refresh the desktop, it's gone. It's gone. Now, if I were to reboot the machine, I'd see that there's an hxdef folder on my desktop. So anyways, that's really using a rootkit, how rootkit works, what a rootkit is. So basically, you've got the screenshots you need in the document. I think I've got like 6 of them. So what I'm looking for at the bottom of the Word document is to write a short paragraph describing the dangers of what a rootkit does. All right. So and it's important to know that throughout history, people have used rootkits. Like Sony had a mechanism to stop copy protection through CDs, audio CDs, because people were like buying the CDs, putting them in their computer, and then ripping them using iTunes and stuff like that. So somebody came up with a genius idea to actually, as soon as you put the disk into the computer, automatically install a rootkit, and then like their player knew the hidden file extension, but that like the operating system didn't. So that way you'd put the disk in, you'd open up iTunes, and iTunes would basically see it as a blank disk. So throughout history, I mean, these have been used, and then I mean the security community just exploded with that, saying, hey, people can be writing viruses, passing viruses in as audio files, and people would never know. So I mean, that's a big deal. Okay, so some options on how to detect them. So I did kind of talk about a little bit some of the programs. How would you clean a rootkit off your infected system? So that just write a short paragraph about what you would do. I'm just going to give you my 2 cents. If there's something installed on my machine that I didn't install on my machine, at that point in time, I consider that machine completely compromised because somebody was actually installing software on my machine. So at that point, I don't trust it just because I know I could write custom code that could circumvent any antivirus. So as long as it's not known and not found out, it will never be detected. So what I do is once something happens and I realize that the machine's been compromised, I truly believe that the only option is to make sure you've got really good backups of your data and then go back to a previous backup, or what I always say, burn it down to the ground. Just format it, reinstall, get everything up to date, make sure that it's tightened, make sure that you've hardened it, and then restore all your backup data files, not executing any new files, but just getting that data like websites, make sure all HTML files are back on there, and then get it back online. So that's the way that I probably would handle it. But anyways, I'm kind of curious on what you guys will come up with. So hopefully you enjoyed the lab, and I'll talk to you soon.